Ghana Must Go has a sad story attached to it. 2 million West African migrants, amongst whom half of them were from Ghana, were expelled from Nigeria in 1983. It all started at the beginning of 1983 when the Nigerian president, Shehu Shagari, ordered the tragic expulsion of numerous economic community of West African states in the first few months of 1983. In the 1970s, many of them had traveled to Nigeria on economic visas without having proper documentation. In the case of Ghanaians, both professional and unskilled migrants were compelled to flee to Nigeria, which at that time was generally regarded as West Africa's economic wonderland due to the intolerable economic conditions in Ghana. Nigeria had benefited from high oil prices in the 1970s and became an oil-rich African country. Jobs increased as a result of the oil boom, particularly in the construction and service industries. Ghanaians moved to Nigeria in pursuit of better lifestyles due to the country's noticeable growth in employment prospects and the administrative systems existing parallels between Ghana and Nigeria. The Ghanaians settled in Nigeria and worked in a variety of professions, including laborers, traders, architects, teachers, artisans, lawyers, and doctors. But suddenly, the economic progression in Nigeria was short-lived since the oil prices decreased significantly in 1982, leading to the socio-economic crisis in Nigeria. The heavily populated country started to suffer as a result of the austerity measures implemented in an effort to stabilize the economy. As urban employment decreased drastically and food shortages worsened, at the time, it was widely accepted that the migration of immigrants from Nigeria's neighboring West African countries was to be blamed for the country's deteriorating social and economic conditions. However, the blame game only became worse with the assistance of Nigerian public officials who took advantage of the presence of immigrants and further presented it as the reason for Nigeria's economic recession. Nigerian leaders were determined to use immigrants as a scapegoat in an effort to hide other significant causes of the country's economic failure, such as the mismanagement of oil revenue, corruption, large amounts of short-term debts, and the Cement Amanda scheme. This was done in anticipation of the impending presidential election in August 1983. Over 2 million immigrants from nearby countries left Nigeria after being given 2 weeks to do so or risk being detained or prosecuted. Immigrants were physically injured during this relocation by Nigerian police, who beat and gassed them in the hopes that they would leave right away. Many of those who left Nigeria were turned away by other nations like the Benin Republic, which did not want to handle the influx of immigrants. Expelled immigrants were compelled to set up a camp in the center of Nigeria and Benin's borders, unsure of their chances of finding a new home. Some Ghanaians were fortunate enough to escape Nigeria by plane with help from the Ghanaian government. Others were not so lucky and perished while traveling by sea in dangerously overcrowded boats. It is interesting to note that the deportation of Ghanaians from Nigeria in the 1980s might be seen as a retaliation response to the expulsion of Nigerian immigrants from Ghana in 1969. Kofi Ebrifa-Busia, the then Prime Minister of Ghana, sought the deportation of Nigerian migrants in November of the same year due to the xenophobia and other factors, including economic concerns. It may seem unreasonable to some, yet it is difficult to dismiss the validity of this hypothesis. This is due to the fact that several recent international political events have demonstrated how politics can be both deeply personal and manifests as a game of passion. As we all know, having passion might be momentary, but they frequently inspire us to do things that could have a lasting impact. It is impossible to say for sure if the wounds experienced by both Ghanaians and Nigerians have completely healed. Nevertheless, ties between the two nations have improved over the decades after both incidents of expulsion. Unquestionably, economic factors play a significant role in the dynamics of immigration, whether they provide migrants with access or deny them access. However, it is not extreme to argue that the obsession with national identity and possibly the promotion of unequal relation between people from different identity groups are also key factors in the displacement of people that result from unfair immigration policies. Immigration laws are subject to the same influences as most other political decisions. According to Michael Foucault, power can be dual in nature and primarily consist of juridical and productive components. This implies that immigration rules that allow for the restriction of migrants from entering another nation state are fundamentally an exercise of legal authority. With regards to the productive side of power, it may be claimed that the passage of unfavorable immigration rules, immigrants are also made to live with fabricated and flawed identities to which they are subjected. Or, to put it another way, immigrants are compelled to adopt the identity of outcasts, uninvited creatures, or burdens. Many Ghanaians who immigrated to Nigeria would have had to deal with the painful separations from relationships they formed in what they likely thought of as their new home, as well as the misleading and fabricated perception of themselves as outsiders or economic leeches. Managing forced migration, in addition to the psychological anguish caused by thinking of oneself as an outsider or a burden, is more challenging. Identity politics can have positive effects, such as giving individuals the chance to appreciate the value of mutual recognition. They can also be used in ways that lead to xenophobia and the mistreatment of members of other identity groups. The expulsion of Ghanaians in the 1980s continues to symbolize a failed intra-African migration. The expulsion of Ghanaians in the 1980s continues to symbolize a failed intra-African migration, despite not being as serious as recurrent examples in nations like South Africa. Members of the global community continue to experience prolonged periods of significant political volatility. Members of the global community continue to experience prolonged periods of significant political volatility, as well as economic and environmental uncertainty outside of West African sub-region. History teaches us that people give in to the demands of migration when they are forced to live somewhere where there is no peace, love, or prosperity. This is an inescapable occurrence that we must learn to embrace and handle more effectively, efficiently, and fairly. It is crucial for leaders to rule in a way that precludes forced immigration and the ordering of people of other ethnicities, not only in Africa but around the world. Some migrants still encounter obstacles even as they use the Ghana must go back in search of a place to call home permanently. The aspiration and dreams of migrants have too often surged before crashing with fabricated fortifications. And as Alberto Rios writes in The Border, a double sonnet, open quote, "The border is mighty, but even the pattern of the seas created a path, not a barrier," end quote. In a world shaped by their uncertainty and constant mobility, one can only hope that there will be more paths created to prevent unwarranted exile and displacement. One can only hope that additional avenues will be open to prevent unnecessary exile and displacement in a society marked by extreme unpredictability and continual movement. One can only hope that additional avenues will be open to prevent unnecessary exile and displacement in a society marked by extreme unpredictability and continual movement.